In this video, I'll show you how to use vagal breathing to calm your brain and how to naturally rewire your thought patterns using biofeedback training. And once you equip yourself with the fundamentals of how the nervous system works, you'll see how anxiety is shaping your thoughts and behaviors. And you'll also see that it's not just one thing that is making you anxious, but it is actually a combination of factors that occur between brain, body, and behavior. And by the end of this video, you will see what it looks and feels like to function without anxiety. When someone is feeling anxious or they go into a state of shock or panic, one of the first things that we say almost instinctively is to breathe. Have you ever wondered why? There is, in fact, an intimate relationship that exists between your breath and the state of your nervous system. And in this video, I'm focusing specifically on the vagal breathing technique that is designed to work with your own biology. And the vagal breathing technique is something that I developed over a number of years using evidence-based neuroscience rather than trying to retrofit science to a particular form of breathing. And I'll briefly describe some of the key benefits. Firstly, vagal breathing is a natural reflex, so it happens by itself. You don't need to think about it. Secondly, it is hardwired into your own biology, and this means that it is effective in real time. You don't need to practice it. And thirdly, it is designed to heighten your vagal tone, which is another way of saying how agile or adaptive your nervous system is, and it allows you to recover much more quickly from perceived states of threat. Let's begin by first breaking down anxiety into manageable stages and see how we can intercept the neural pathway at specific stages to rewire the brain much more effectively. We can classify anxiety based on DSM criteria, which is a set of checkboxes that psychiatrists use to categorize physical symptoms. And based on the particular diagnosis, there are two main forms of treatment. One is medication and the other one is cognitive behavioral therapy, both of which have a 40% response rate. And with medication, you do have to accommodate for the side effects. And with cognitive behavioral therapy and other forms of talk therapy, there's a very high relapse rate. And I'll explore a little bit more about why this is the case a little bit later in the video. But before we begin, a quick disclaimer that this video is for educational purposes only, and it does not substitute a clinical diagnosis. Let us first consider acute anxiety, which is driven by irrational fears such as phobias and certain social anxiety. And I'm not talking about social anxiety disorder, which is actually a separate topic. But in acute anxiety, you could be functioning fairly normally throughout the day and then suddenly be immobilized by acute anxiety. For example, an employer can look at an employee and suddenly they freeze on the spot and lose all their skills in that moment, and this is called the de-skilled effect. Or it can happen in a social context such as approach anxiety, where someone you're attracted to approaches you and starts speaking to you for the first time, and in that moment you suddenly become someone else. You lose your train of thought, your voice becomes high-pitched, and you struggle to find the right words to say. These can be accompanied by physical symptoms as well, which include nausea, shortness of breath, chest palpitations, and trembling. The physical symptoms are a sign that your nervous system has switched from the parasympathetic state, which is rest and restorative, to the sympathetic state, which is the fight or flight response. And the de-skilled effect is an example of the freeze response in the fight or flight mechanism. The most immediately accessible tool that you have in moments of acute anxiety is your breath. And as I mentioned before, there's a fundamental relationship that exists between your breathing and the state of your nervous system. And this is called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, where every time you inhale, your heart rate rises to saturate blood oxygen. And every time you exhale, the heart rate slows down to exchange carbon dioxide through the lungs. And by prolonging the exhale, you have direct control over your own heart rate and therefore the state of your nervous system. And if you simply keep the exhale twice as long as the inhale, you are able to relax the nervous system even under states of threat and experience a sense of safety. So now I'm going to demonstrate what it looks like to do vagal breathing. So in order to do this, we inhale through the nose, expand the diaphragm, and exhale through the mouth. As if you are deflating the body, and we keep the exhale at least twice as long as the inhale. So I'll do it once more. So you can apply this vagal breathing anytime you feel acute anxiety. And in my online training course, which is linked in the card above, I show you how to use vagal breathing at progressive levels of threat and how to even further accelerate heart rate recovery by integrating autonomic, sensory motor, and emotional feedback loops. Using breath to feel safe is the first step. Now let's have a look at how to use vagal breathing to rewire the brain more effectively. When anxiety has become a familiar state and you don't know what it's like to live without it, the nervous system has gone past the point where the parasympathetic state feels safe, and we call this generalized anxiety disorder. The physical symptoms accompanying generalized anxiety disorder include immune dysfunction, digestive issues, and irregular sleep patterns, because the sympathetic state has now started to override the functions of the parasympathetic state, which includes rest, digestion, and repair. So anxiety is essentially an overreactive fear network, and fears relate to the brain by a structure at the base of our skull called the locus coeruleus. And when this structure is activated, it sends a shockwave-like signal throughout the brain, and this alerts us to threat. And when the prefrontal cortex perceives that the threat is irrelevant, it downregulates the emotional center of the brain called the basolateral amygdala, and then we start to calm back down. In anxiety, the emotional center of the brain remains overreactive, and so we remain in a state of threat. And keep this emotional center in mind, because we'll revisit it to see exactly which stage of this pathway we intercept to rewire the brain more effectively. The great paradox of generalized anxiety disorder is that the anxious state has now become familiar, and what is familiar is what we think is safe, so we do everything to maintain it. And people who have a generalized anxiety disorder can still be high functioning, but they're held back by the residual tension in their nervous system, and this means that fear has now taken possession of their thoughts. And this can look like, firstly, procrastination, where you put so much pressure on yourself to do something that you avoid doing it at all costs. And this is the flight response in the fight or flight mechanism, and it is simply avoidance behavior. Then you have commitment phobia, where you may be so terrified of losing someone you love that you refuse to commit in the first place. And because now all your decisions are coming from a state of fear, you end up losing the person you love anyway. And then you have self-soothing activities such as emotional eating, promiscuity, and other forms of reckless consumption, which are simply pleasure-seeking activities for dopamine hit, which is always a temporary fix. And this is a very dangerous road to dependency and an investment in false sense of securities. Breath alone is not enough for generalized anxiety disorder, because it falls short of genuinely rewiring the brain. What is actually required is behavioral changes that reinforces the parasympathetic state to feel safe. And that is to say, to suspend your beliefs and go against what feels right until it starts to work. And to really understand what I mean by this, I must first explain what I mean by rewiring the human brain. There are actually two forms of rewiring. The first is actual neurobiological change called long-term potentiation, which strengthens synaptic connections, and long-term depression, which weakens synaptic connections. And the second form of rewiring is hype, created by people who are experts at marketing false hope, and this comes at the expense of neuroscience and actually does a lot of damage to the industry. So let's have a look at the prefrontal cortex basolateral amygdala pathway, again from the context of actual neurobiological change and which stage of the circuitry that we need to intercept. The first stage of the circuitry is emotion, and any threat, whether it be physical or psychological, will elicit emotion, which is short latency both neurochemically and experientially, and that is to say it will only last about 200 milliseconds. This is how long emotion takes to be generated by the limbic system and enter our conscious perception, where we reach stage 2, which is called feeling. And feeling is essentially when the cortex starts to integrate time parameters, such as giving emotion meaning by integrating memory or projecting future scenarios to create fear. So this is stage 2, and feelings can last anywhere between a couple of seconds to a few minutes. Then if feeling starts to consume us, then it reaches stage 3, which is mood. And mood can last anywhere between a few hours to a few days, depending on the agility of your nervous system. And this is really what I meant when I mentioned vagal tone. And at stage 4, mood has consumed us to the point where it is beyond our control, and clinically we refer to this as generalized anxiety disorder. States are neurochemically reinforced by behaviors that trick us into a false sense of security, such as the self-soothing activities we talked about. And this is why states are so much more difficult to shift, because someone could be in an anxious mood, for example, just before a job interview, but it is so much more difficult to shift an anxious state, which is neurochemically and behaviorally reinforced. To rewire the brain, we have to intercept the neural circuitry at stage 1 before emotion is translated into feeling. And at first glance, 200 milliseconds seems far too quick to intercept with thought, and this is true. And this is why we do not invest in positive psychology or try to talk our way out of anxiety. And positive psychology at best will only provide temporary comfort if that is what you're looking for, but it does not create meaningful change, because rewiring cannot happen when there is a conflict of interest between brain and body. Academics continue to ignore this, and psychiatrists continue to administer treatment before putting the body into a state of safety, and wonder why treatment only has 40% response rate and such a high relapse rate. It is now clear that your heart rate changes before the brain gets the opportunity to process information, and you can see this for yourself. The next time you feel threatened, you'll find that changes in your heart rate will govern your metabolic rate, your organ function, and even your higher thought processes. And you'll see that when there's fear, your thinking will become very linear and goal-directed, and this tunnel vision view of the world comes at the expense of creativity. In my Train Your Nervous System online course, I actually depart from legacy-based neuroscience literature and teach you the exact 8-level pathway that exists between brain and body. And since vagal breathing is a biological reflex, we can use the 200 millisecond emotional spike to trigger the nervous system to relax under threat before the brain gets the opportunity to go into the fear or survival mode. And this pathway intercepts the prefrontal cortex and basolateral amygdala pathway between stimulus and response. And so as long as you're focusing on your breath, you'll be able to break the momentum of thought, and eventually a gap will appear between your thoughts. And this gap is really important, because using vagal breathing you can prolong this gap, and eventually you'll find that instead of simply reacting to things, you will have all the time in the world to choose whether you want to react or to respond. And this is where the iconic saying comes from: between stimulus and response, you have the ability to choose. This process is highly effective, especially when you're experiencing a panic attack. And in my HRV biofeedback training video, which is linked in this card above, I show you side-by-side comparisons of what it looks like to do vagal breathing against other breathing techniques. And if you do have a biofeedback device such as an Apple Watch, you may wish to test this out for yourself and share your experiences in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this video, hit like and subscribe for more videos like this on my channel. But now I'd like to focus on what it looks and feels like to live without anxiety. We have all had experiences of when our nervous system is in a heightened state. And this is perhaps why so many people crave action-adventure sports as a form of escape, because these activities artificially introduce a gap in thought when all thoughts are momentarily suspended. But it was never about these activities, which only provide a momentary glimpse of what it feels like to exist outside anxiety. When you rewire the prefrontal cortex basolateral amygdala pathway to feel safe under threat, you've effectively rewired the sympathetic state to a parasympathetic baseline, and now the rewiring process is complete. So if you are living your life consumed by thought, you are living your life at the mercy of your own emotion. And using vagal breathing, you'll find that you're able to introduce a gap in your thought, which gives you the opportunity to let go. And you can do this right now in this very moment, because it was never about controlling the chaos, but letting go of the paralyzing grip of fear that is pretending to protect us.